I want to start with a guiding principle concerning the gospel of Christ. You hear the word gospel quite a bit, and maybe you already know this, that's okay, but I just want to, real quick before we hit the principle, get to the definition so we're all on the same page. When you hear the word gospel, when the Bible uses the word gospel, it's referring to what's called the good news, right? The good news of Jesus Christ. You remember the angels showing up in the Christmas story and saying, hey, I give you good news of great joy, right? So you're like, oh yeah, the good news of Jesus. And so when you hear the good news, we say we're talking about the good news or the gospel, we're referring to the story of Jesus Christ, his life, his ministry, his death, his burial, his resurrection. That's all included in the gospel. Now, the Apostle Paul lays down the principle I want to talk about, just to start things off about the gospel in Romans chapter 1, verse 16, where he says, I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes, for the Jew first and also to the Greek. There's a huge principle that is in this verse right here about the power of God that comes out through the gospel, through the story of Jesus Christ. The principle is the gospel has life-changing power. You can attest to that, correct? Yeah. You're here when most of the world is hunkered down in blankets, drinking hot cocoa because it's freezing cold outside, and way below that, because you know there's power in the gospel. Something changed you somewhere along the line. The gospel has life-changing power. I don't completely understand it. I can't fully explain it, but there's something life-changing when we talk about the story of Jesus, when we speak of his birth, when we speak of his ministry and his life, when we speak about his death and his crucifixion, when we speak about his resurrection. It is more than just a story. It is more than just an historical account of something that happened. It is the story of the living God who sent his only Son to save us. And something that happens, there's something spiritual that happens in here in the telling of his story, more so than the telling of your story or my story. There's something about God's story, the gospel, the story of Jesus, that has some power to it. The word power that Paul uses here comes from the Greek word dunamis, where we get the word in English dynamite. Now, when you think of dynamite, do you think of squishy, warm, fuzzy things, or do you think of something powerful and destructive? I mean, it depends on what kind of dynamite, I guess, you got, but I think of things like, that are explosive and violent, and violent can be good sometimes. Sometimes we need some violence in our soul to kind of blow things up and get us back where we belong. I've had the privilege so many times through the years of being like in the front row of someone's life when they've come to me and there's been some violent reaction in their head, in their soul. They come, they're in tears, they're weeping, or they haven't slept for days, or whatever. They've come to terms with the fact that I have sinned. There's sin in my life. I've offended the living God. Like suddenly it made sense to them, whether they were young or in their 70s. I've had people of all ages come. It took them however long, but somewhere along the line, the story of Jesus broke through, and they realized, man, I'm lost without Jesus. And that explosive thing happens in their life. There is terror when they realize how close they came to missing salvation. And for the first time in their lives, they realize Jesus Christ is a must for them. I remember it happening to me. I am fortunate enough that I was very young when it hit me. It hit me, and I won't get into the big details. Many of you already heard the story, but it's there. I was hearing the gospel at home. I was hearing the gospel at church, in Sunday school class. I understood it. It was a nice story about this good guy. It was really great, but it wasn't doing anything. It wasn't changing my life. Nothing was happening in me. And one day, somewhere in the fourth grade, it was in the summer. I can't tell you if it was before or after. I don't remember. It's been long enough ago now. But around the fourth grade-ish area, I was in a grocery store, and I was shoplifting an ice cream sandwich because I was part of a stealing club. We had to go to a store every day and steal stuff. That's been another whole story. But so there I was in the store, and I thought, it's hot. I'm hungry. Ice cream cone. I can achieve my goal of shoplifting and have a snack at the same time. So it was a win-win for everybody. And there I was, long sleeve shirt on a hot summer day with the ice cream bar at my sleeve. Walking, that should have told you something. And I'm walking out the door, and there's my Sunday school teacher who worked at that grocery store. And she says, "Hi, Danny." And I looked over, and like whatever something explosive happened in my life right then when all the words of the gospel suddenly like clicked. I don't know why. There's a mystery. It wasn't someone right there preaching at me, but someone in the past had. My Sunday school teacher had talked to me many, many times through the years, had taught all kinds of lessons. For whatever, it all clicked at that moment as I'm walking out of the store, victory in my forearm. I'm ready. And for the first time in my life, it hit me something just kind of, and I grieved for what I was doing. I hadn't grieved for sin before that. It was cool to get away with. It was exciting, and it was like, yeah, what can I get? What can I get away with? And for the first time in that young little life, I felt genuine grief. And for the first time in my life, I wanted to reach out and get to know God. And that set me on a journey that I'm still on to this day. But I don't know if it was a few days or weeks later, because again, that was a long time ago. I was in a vacation Bible school at that same church, and that same teacher who was teaching us, she was committed to our group of kids, my grade. And she's teaching the class about how Jesus calls us to be disciples, to be fishers of men, and whatever, something clicked, like I went another step there, and it all clicked with me, and I thought, I want to be caught, you know? And I remember her telling her a little lesson, and I thought, yes, I want to be a disciple. I ran home and I prayed and asked Jesus to be in my heart and my life and to forgive me and the whole thing that you're taught to do as a kid. And I was at a church that didn't practice baptism a whole lot, so it was a few years later when through study, I realized, okay, that's something I need to be a part of my life as well in the discipleship process, and I did that too at a different time. But there was a time in that time frame, around the fourth grade, I had made a radical change in my life. The gospel suddenly became clear to me, and I also, about that time frame, was when I felt this very distinct call from God. Hey, I know you're in fourth grade. You don't know anything. You're going to be a pastor someday. And I'm like, what? You know, I mean, but it's just been in my heart, in my life, ever since that time period of my life. Those are you have your own story. You have your own story. Whether you were raised in the faith or whatever, there was a moment where you realized, I need this. You know, I mean, this is Jesus died for me, and I put him there. There's just this life-changing moment where the light turns on and you realize you're a sinner, and you realize what will happen if you stay in your sin, and you realize just how deeply God loves you and how Jesus came to clean up the messes that you've made, because we've all made messes, and how he is there to clean things up. That is the power that's in the gospel. Have you felt that power? I mean, right? No? Yeah. You can talk. We got to turn the lights up a little bit. You can talk. Yeah. That is the power you've experienced. And my goal this morning is pretty simple. It is to reacquaint you with the power of this gospel. And to show you an example of Jesus displaying this power through telling his own story. We tell his story. When you're Jesus, you get to tell your own story. So it's him. And it starts in John chapter 4, in verse 3, where it says, he left Judea, departed again for Galilee. He had to pass through Samaria. So he's down south. He's going to go up north. He's going to just go right up, and he's going to go to this Sychar is the town. He had to pass through Samaria. He came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the field that Jacob had given his son Joseph. This very historic area. Jacob's well was there. So Jesus, wearied as he was from his journey, was sitting beside the well. It was about the 6th hour, which, depending on if you're using Jewish time or Roman time, it's either noon or it's evening. But either way, he's tired. It's either really super hot and he's tired, been walking all morning, or he's been walking all day. Either way, he's tired, he's wearied, he's going to sit down and rest a little bit. He is taking his disciples through Gentile territory. And if you've been around the faith, you know a Gentile is anybody who's not a Jew, right? So, and that there was a lot of friction between Jews and Gentiles. Gentiles were not clean by the law. I mean, I'm not saying they're dirtier than other people. They weren't clean spiritually in the understanding of the Jews. So they were unclean. If I came too close to Gentiles, I would be unclean. They were dirty, smelly people as far as the Jewish people were concerned. Generally, they referred to them as dogs because they're just gross. They follow the wrong gods. They eat the wrong foods. They do all the wrong stuff. They're intimate with the wrong people. Pretty much everything about their lives is different than what the Old Testament law required of Jews. So Jewish people would be themselves declared unclean if they hung out too closely with the Gentiles. So they just kind of stayed away for the most part. Now, Samaria was a step worse than a regular Gentile because the Samaritans were the offspring of Jews who had intermarried with Gentiles. And so the offsprings are diluted Jewish blood. Defiled Jewish blood in their minds. So they're not only unclean, but they have destroyed the bloodline as far as the average Jew was concerned of the Jewish nation. So it's an unhealthy level of bitterness and racism and anger between Jews and Samaritans. They just stayed away. They just didn't like them for no other reason than how they were born. And so here they are, outside of a city. They've been walking in the desert. They're hot, probably dehydrated a little bit, probably tired. It says they were tired. They're covered in dust and all that stuff. And Jesus sits down at the well. The disciples run into town, and they're going to get some food. And Jesus is hanging out there, kind of resting, and a woman comes up to the well to get some water. Now, the average Jew wouldn't even acknowledge her. The average Jew wouldn't talk to her, wouldn't look her in the eye, wouldn't have a conversation, but he strikes up a conversation with the woman, and he asks her for a drink of water. And we cut in right after that in verse 9, where it says, the Samaritan woman said, well, how is it that you, a Jew, ask for a drink from me, a woman of Samaria? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. Jesus answered her, if you knew the gift of God and who it is that is saying to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. The woman said to him, sir, you have nothing to draw water with. You're just some dude traveling. You can't get the water. You don't have access like I do. She brought her own, you bring your own access to the water. You can't draw anything out of the water. The well is deep. Where do you get that living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob? He gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did his sons and his livestock. And Jesus said, verse 13, everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks of the water that I give will never be thirsty again. The water that I give him will become in him a spring of water welling up to eternal life. The woman said to him, sir, give me this water so that I will not be thirsty or have to come here to draw water. It's a simple conversation. They're talking about water at a well. And Jesus, though, pivots the conversation pretty quickly into a spiritual conversation. Hey, can I have a drink of water? And she's like, do you know who I am? I'm Samaritan. What are you even talking to me for? And he pivots it. Well, do you know who I am? Do you know who I am? God sent me. Do you know what he sent me to do? If you did, you'd ask me for a glass of water rather than me ask for you. And I would have given you living water, the kind that quenches the thirst that you'd never have to draw from again. It leads to eternal life. So he pivots the conversation to a spiritual conversation, and then he kicks it up another level in verse 16 when Jesus says, go call your husband and come here. The woman answered him, I have no husband. And Jesus said, you're right in saying I have no husband. You have had 5 husbands, and the one you now have is not your husband. What you've said is true. Now he has an advantage we don't have. He knows he knows everything. I mean, he's God, right? He knows what's in her heart. He knows her living arrangements. He knows her past, everything. They continue to talk, and she's sensing he must be a prophet or something. How does he know these things? How does he understand these things? And so she enters the spiritual conversation. They talk. She brings up the topic of worship, like, hey, yeah, I can talk spiritual stuff too, and she throws in that. They talk about the coming Messiah, and Jesus tells her in verse 26, oh, Messiah, you mentioned? Yeah, that's me. I'm the one. He straight out tells her, I'm the Messiah. In verse 28, she ends this conversation. She left her water jar and went away into the town and said to the people, come see a man who told me all I ever did. Can this be the Messiah? Christ is Christos, Messiah. It's the Greek for Messiah. Can this be Messiah? And they went out of the town, and they were coming to him. So she runs into town, tells everybody, and now they're all coming out toward Jesus at the well. And that's not a big, long conversation. Right? That's not an hour talk going through an outline and diagrams, and he's not throwing things at her and calling her all kinds of names. I mean, that's just her sitting down he's sitting down with her having a conversation, pivots it toward the spiritual. She takes it up a level, he takes it up the next level, says, hey, I can give you eternal life if you want it. And in that conversation, she's like, whoa, she runs, tells the city, they're all coming back. A light turned on somewhere in there. A light, there was mind blown type thing, an explosion. Something happened with the gospel as he explained who he was to her. She runs off, leaving her water jar behind, runs into the town, tells everybody she can find about the conversation she is having with Jesus. So now she's having the conversation, she's telling the gospel. She said, follow me, we'll go out to the well, you got to meet this guy. The disciples missed most of that, because they were in looking for food, so they don't even know what's going on. They came back like at the end and see her running off, and they're like, I wonder what's going on, And then they're telling Jesus, come on, you got to eat, and they're having this conversation. And as they're talking with Jesus, he interrupts them in verse 35. He says, well, look. There's a whole crowd of people coming out. Look. I tell you, lift up your eyes and see that the fields are white for harvest. Look. Just take a look. Here they come. The fields are white for harvest. They stay in a town a couple days, and we're told in verse 39, many Samaritans from that town believed in him because of the woman's testimony about him. It's the gospel. That's the gospel. And she told him, he told me all that I ever did. So when the Samaritans came to him, they asked him to stay with them. He stayed there for 2 days, and many more believed because of his word. They said to the woman, it's no longer because of what you said that we believe, for we have heard for ourselves, and we know that this is indeed the Savior of the world. Revival just happened in a town because of a little conversation at a well between people who are supposed to not like each other. But Jesus said, I'm going to just, hey, glass of water? Can you get me some water? And pivoted the conversation toward the spiritual. That's the power of the gospel. That's what Paul is talking about in Romans when he says that the gospel has the power to change lives. Jesus talks to a woman. She drops everything, runs into the city, tells others. They come out, see for themselves. 2 days later, many more believe. Couple takeaways from this that I think is important for us. To keep this not from being some story from long ago, but what is that? What's that for us? Number one, the fields are always ripe or ready for harvest. Sometimes we just don't see it. Most of the time, we don't see it. It just struck me in the verse when Jesus said, "Lift." Back in verse 35, look, I tell you, lift up your eyes and see, the fields are white for harvest. We look out and see people all over the place. We never think of that there are people ready. We just think, oh, look at all the people. Oh, they're lost. Oh, they're whatever, they're going crazy. There's all, insanity out there. The fields are always right. We're always looking for this right opportunity to say the right thing at the right moment. And the fact is, the right opportunity for someone is always right there in front of you. We generally just don't know when it is. We aren't looking through the eyes of someone who's going to harvest anything. We're looking through someone who's just doing our own thing. I'm just trying to survive. And Jesus said, look through the eyes of a harvester. Look. We have hundreds of thousands of people just within a few miles of us. The harvest is ready. Not for all of them. It wasn't for all of them in this town, but Jesus himself there. But for some of them. Same is true for you. We discount people too easily. She's probably not interested. She's had 5 husbands and living with the guy she's with now. Woman at the well. Not that kid. Don't waste your time on him. He's from a rough family. He's a shoplifter. Really? Why waste your time with those people? You never know. You never know when God's going to break through and reach somebody. And what he's going to use and how he's going to use his story, what part of his story, for everybody. For all of us here, if we were to tell us the moment we first got it, it's a slightly different angle from the same story. The story's the same, Jesus. The gospel's the same. But there was a certain piece that grabbed us, and finally we're like, whoa, that's what did it. Maybe we heard it hundreds of times. Maybe we heard it thousands of times. Maybe it was the first time we heard it, but we all heard it at some point and said, yeah. You just never know when God's going to break through someone's life. It could be while you're just doing your daily tasks, like getting water at a well. It could be while you're in the midst of active rebellion against God. I'm going to shoplift. I'm going to steal this ice cream sandwich. You don't know what you might say to someone that will turn them to Jesus Christ. Our job is not to decide if they're ready or if they're worthy or if you think they'll be willing or not. Our job is simply to tell the story of Jesus and let God worry about the rest. I guarantee you 100%, if you were to go out into the highways and byways of the central Iowa area, the harvest is 100% ready for somebody, for multiple people, especially now. What a crazy year. There are people seeking and searching for someone. Somebody you know, a coworker, a family member, a neighbor, somebody. I guarantee you God is working in their heart, and you rub shoulders with that person regularly, and all that's missing is you bringing the story. You don't have to be awkward or weird, just you bringing the story. And that's the other take home, to figure out a way to bring Jesus into every conversation you have. Maybe not every conversation, that might get a little wacky, but you know what I'm saying? Get to the point where you can bring him in a non-threatening way. You're not beating people over the head with it. You don't have to be awkward. Just season your conversation with salt, as Jesus would say. Add a little flavor to it. And if they're ready, they'll take it to the next level. The Samaritan woman, she took it to the next level. He just said, hey, can you give me a drink? Do you know who I am? Living water. I mean, she came after him. She could have said, well, that's weird, and just ignored him, but she didn't. She engaged in the conversation. She was ready. God was doing something in her life and in her heart. There are hundreds of conversations you have regularly, maybe even every day, where you can just interject something as simple as, man, I'm sure glad I have my faith at a time like this. You're not being crazy. You're not saying, hey, you're a sinner. You're just throwing some faith in. If they're ready, they're going to respond to that in some way. If they're not, they're just going to say, oh, wacky, or whatever, ignore it, whatever. But someone who's ready might be at a point where they'll take that conversation to the next level. Like, what do you mean? How does your faith help you? Oh, well, let me tell you. See, that wasn't painful. That wasn't, being aggressive. That was just throwing it out there and letting God do what he wants. There are ample opportunities when someone that you're talking to is talking about their life, and you can just say, hey, can I pray for you? I love it. Dean Troon, some of you know him. He's come here a few times. He was here about a year ago, and because he spoke for real men. And I love going out to eat with him, because every time we go out to eat with him, he talks to the server and he gets a prayer request. Every time. He's all over the world. He goes and he gets a prayer request. And some people just say, oh, yeah, pray for my brother. Or, and some people will take that conversation to the next level, like, well, whatever they might say. If God's working in their heart, they might take it to the next level. Or it could end. But that's how do you know? How do you know? Unless you don't try. Someday, somebody, somewhere, if you do that on a regular basis, will take that to the next level, because the harvest is ready. So pray for opportunities. See them. Again, you don't have to be weird. You don't have to be like, oh, I'm superior. Just say, hey, can I pray? What can I pray for? Can I pray for that? Say, someone comes to this situation, hey, do you mind if I pray for that? Can I pray for you every day for that for a while? And you just do it. Pray for boldness for you to bring that into the conversation, because sometimes we're the ones who stop ourselves. You may be the person who will help turn on the light for someone. And man, there's nothing more exciting than that. And it's usually something you didn't even know you said, that they'll tell you later. You're like, really? I don't know. I was just, I just said, hey, can you give me a glass of water? And it turned into a conversation. But you could be that person that God is using who will help them to turn, and they'll then go to their circle of friends and turn on lights there, all about this. That's what happens with the story of Jesus. And we can't talk about this without, talking about you, of course. Where you are. Where are you with Jesus? today. He doesn't care about what you've done in the past. He doesn't care about how many mistakes you've made. He was just talking to a woman. He didn't really even bring it up other than mention, yeah, I know. I mean, he didn't get into the details with her. And let me tell you how rotten you are, woman of Samaria. I mean, he didn't do that. He just kind of let her know, by the way, I know who you are. He's not worried that you've messed up a relationship in the past, or you're in one that's messed up right now, or if you're in the middle of stealing an ice cream bar from a local grocery store. The story is, he died for that. That's what it's all about. He died for that sin, and that you might be forgiven. And so he offers that spring of living water that wells up in a believer and fills you with joy and purpose and forgiveness and grace and gives you a whole new life. And so part of my job is to motivate you, those of you who believe already, to go out and share that great, amazing message with the people you know. But also, if you're here today and maybe don't know, let me tell you that no matter who you are, no matter how bad you think you've been, or the things that you've done, or the things you're doing, he knows exactly what's going on in your life. He knows exactly what's gone on in your past. He loves you anyway. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that crazy? Isn't that crazy? He loved a little fourth grade boy who daily was going into stores and stealing things and thought it was great, even though he was going to church on Sundays. I mean, he was living a lie. He loved me anyway. I didn't want to give you a new life. And if you're ready for that, please, let's talk about taking the next step.